Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking at Nebraska with Parker Gabriel. You can catch him on Husker Extra. And, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel for the very best in college football coverage from myself and the best bloggers and broadcasters across the nation. The audio version at Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Parker, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, so this is an intriguing camp. And no, that is not a segue into your most intriguing list. It's something that I already thought in regards to Scott Frost on the scene. Obviously, we know his accolades and the ties to the program and the whole deal. Let's dive into spring practice. They've got a week under their belts. They've got this week off, then they get back into it. Everybody's talking quarterback. Patrick O'Brien doing extra work from what we see online in regards to a quarterback coach, working with the likes of Keenan Allen. Get us set up for this quarterback situation. I kind of doubt that there's anything out there yet with only 1 week in the books, but how you feel about the situation?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So last year's starter, Tanner Lee, was a Tulane transfer. He'd been in college for 5 years. He had a sixth at his disposal, decided to jump into the NFL draft process instead. He's a pocket guy. Interestingly, so there's three scholarship quarterbacks that probably will be battling for Nebraska's starting job. Patrick O'Brien's a redshirt sophomore, as you mentioned. Tristan Gebbia, redshirt freshman, and then a true freshman who enrolled in January, Adrian Martinez. That was the first scholarship offer that went out from Scott Frost and Nebraska's quarterbacks coach Mario Verduzco after Frost got the job. So O'Brien, Gebbia, and Martinez, that's sort of the quarterback battle as it stands now. O'Brien's the only one with any college experience. He was Nebraska's backup last year. Played a half against Minnesota and some garbage time stuff. So three inexperienced guys, young guys, a little bit different skill sets. Martinez, more of a true, dual threat sort of guy, a little bit faster. But the staff thinks that O'Brien and Gebbia each could run efficiently enough to run the system. So like you say, no word really so far. It's really early. It's the first week of spring, but it'll be talked about all the way until September 1st.
New quarterback, new coach, new offensive system, new offensive coaching staff. So is it going to be a drastic departure from what we've seen under Mike Riley?
Yeah, it's about as different as it can be. I mean, the Scott Frost, Chip Kelly offense is a lot different. I don't know if the run-pass splits will be markedly different, but the way they go about it will be completely changed. Up-tempo, they're going to spread out. There'll be a lot of zone read. And that's kind of with the quarterbacks, neither O'Brien or Gebbia runs a 4-4 or probably anything close. But if you got a read option and you're reading a guy and you can make the right read, and if that dictates running the ball, if you can be efficient and get 6 or 7 yards or take what the defense gives you, that they think that's enough to run this offense. And obviously they led the nation in scoring and were second in yards per play in the country last year at Central Florida. So wherever this offense has gone, it's worked, and they're trying to figure out how the quarterback part of it moves in the first year here.
Parker, is it fair to say that Mike Riley, despite his inability to get this where it needs to be in terms of expectations overall, never got a chance to instill the West Coast offense to the place where he needed it to be with the personnel and the quarterback?
Yeah, it's fair to an extent. I mean, it was when he got here, he had Tommy Armstrong as his quarterback, who was more of a run pass threat. And so they had this 2-year buffer period where nobody beat out Tommy Armstrong for the job. And so they sort of were in this mix of what was he comfortable with and what were they trying to do. And so last year was the first year with Tanner Lee, where they were sort of all the way to where they wanted it to be in terms of their offensive system. So yeah, you could say they didn't have multiple years with the exact personnel they wanted, but they also made the decision to go with Tommy Armstrong for 2 years and play this sort of hybrid style before committing to Tanner Lee, who's really talented but turned the ball over a lot, far too often last year.
We're on the line with Parker Gabriel. Join him on Husker Extra for Nebraska football. They have new posts coming out each and every day, lining you up for the rest of spring practice and beyond, and of course recruiting's all the time as well. So when you look at the offense, who excites you, who needs to step up because of a void, what answers need to be completed, maybe not by the end of spring, but certainly by that opener?
Well, it's interesting because at the early signing day in December, they only had 6 scholarship wide receivers. They got a good break. Stanley Morgan, who's an All Big Ten guy last year, set the single season receiving record here as a junior. Opted to come back for his senior year and play in this offense. Troy Walters, the offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach, loves him. They've got maybe the best returning receiving duo in the Big Ten with Morgan and J.D. Spielman, who'll be a redshirt sophomore. Spielman's a guy in this offense that they're installing. There's a lot of movement between the slot, the backfield. You got guys that are sort of rushing and receiving combination threats. And Spielman fits perfectly in that. He's a game breaker. He played a lot of running back at Eden Prairie in Minnesota when he was in high school. They used his redshirt year, Mike Riley did here, to sort of turn him into a slot receiver. And now he's in an offense that fits his skill set just about perfectly. So those two guys, and then running back, probably a skill-wise position to watch. They brought in, by 24/7 Sports composite rankings, the best junior college running back in the country, Greg Bell from Arizona Western. Right now, he's probably the odds-on favorite to be the starter, just because Trey Bryant, who looked like a feature back last year, is dealing with some sort of long-standing knee injuries. You can see young guys in that mix. They're not just obviously going to use one running back, but the two top receivers and Greg Bell sort of the starting point for their skill set on offense.
Mark Rogers TV with you, the voice of college football, talking Nebraska today. The Huskers taking a week off, and then they continue their spring drills and get set for the spring game. And a lot of questions to answer, of course, in Scott Frost's much anticipated 2018 debut. We've got Parker Gabriel on the line. Complete audio versions on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. You can join Parker on Husker Extra. All right, Parker, when I think Nebraska defense, I obviously still it's connected to the past and dominance and black shirts. And it was so strange to me that the end of the Big 12 run was led by a defense carrying a bad offense that was one of the best in the nation, that was good enough to hold Texas and Colt McCoy to, well, you could say 10 points or 13 points, depending on your perspective, but that good. And then it suddenly went downhill in a hurry, joining the Big Ten. And even when the Nebraska teams were pretty good, they were offense heavy. The defense has produced a couple really good safety. The DN position's been outstanding a few times, but are we going to get back to that anytime soon?
Well, it's interesting. Someone asked, so last week before spring ball started, Scott Frost had a news conference, and he was asked, what is the biggest difference between the 3-4 system that they're installing now under their new defensive coordinator, Eric Shenander, and the 3-4 defense that Bob Diaco ran last year? And Frost said, well, the biggest difference is we're hoping to get some stops this year. And that just, that speaks volumes. It doesn't matter how they do it. They just need to get off the field. And so this year, it'll be interesting to watch. I'm not sure necessarily personnel-wise they're exactly where they want to be. The numbers are still pretty light at corner. Secondary is going to be sort of interesting. But this staff has talked a lot about identifying playmakers and then putting them in position to succeed. You don't have to be a weak side linebacker. You can play in that spot sometimes, maybe walk out over a slot other times. If you can find guys that make plays, they think a little bit outside the box that way. And so it'll be interesting to see how fast they can turn it around. But it's a defense. Shenander with UCF last year, they forced 32 turnovers. They were second in the nation in turnovers forced. And so the idea is, Eric Shenander talks about it, he wants to match the defensive system to what the offense does, which is play fast, play aggressive. And so the idea is limit big plays and create turnovers and get the ball back to Scott Frost's offense as many times as possible.
Is there anybody in the defensive side that we're not necessarily familiar with that you see breaking out? So you've listed players on both sides of the ball as the most intriguing in the spring. I've been asking guys like yourself for the breakout players, so we'll kind of match up lists in regards to who you really like on the defensive side, whether they're that good that you think they're going to break out, or they need to play and they need to make an impact.
Well, Will Honus is one. He's a junior college linebacker who's coming in. One of the things that Scott Frost and the coaching staff set out to do right when they got the job in December for that early signing period was to infuse a lot of college level experience into the program. And so they took 6 junior college players, I think. 5 of them are here early. Will Honus is one of them. He was at Butler Community College in Kansas last year. Just sort of an under-recruited kid out of high school. He's in Wichita. He got hurt. There was not a lot of interest. He didn't play much of his senior year. And so he went to junior college and played well as a freshman and then really well as a sophomore. And most of the Big Ten West wanted him. Wisconsin was on him late. Iowa was in on him. A bunch of Big Ten schools wanted him. And Scott Frost and the new inside linebackers coach Barrett Ruud, who of course is the all-time leading tackler here at Nebraska, went down there and got him in 10 days or so, convinced him to come here. And you'd expect that he would slide right in and be an impact player. Obviously, you don't know till you see someone play at the Big Ten level, but they brought him here to play. They have to replace their leading tackler, Chris Weber, who's off to medical school in the fall. And so Will Honus is a guy right in the middle of the defense that I think, they try not to heap too much on him right away, but just the way he was recruited and the way they've talked about him in the offseason program, he might be not only an early player, but an early leader on the defense.
We've got Husker Extras, Parker Gabriel on the line to talk Nebraska football. Nebraska doing that 1 week of spring practice, pulling back for spring break. Then they're back at it next week. And we talk about defense, and we encourage everyone to check out Husker Extra and Parker's look at the outside linebacking position and the difference and the change that we're going to see coming up in 2018. So when we look at Scott Frost, he gave us a little glimpse there, Parker, of the difference between Mr. Nice Guy Mike Riley, who's never going to throw shade at anybody, and then Scott Frost not doing anything disrespectful, but just basically saying, hey, we expect to make some stops on defense and play a little bit tougher and make some stands. Any other differences that you see between the way things are being run now and the previous regime?
Well, I think the big one is with Scott Frost, he played here. He grew up in Nebraska and Wood River, and obviously everybody knows that, but it's astounding how much he knows everything about the history here, and he knows what he thinks worked and what didn't. I mean, he kind of, you can just see, he casually on Wednesday talked about how, he said, oh, we had some great years under Frank Solich, and then we kind of went through a rough period. That'd be Bill Callahan's tenure. And then Bo Pelini did a lot of good things in his years, but they just never quite got over that hump and won a conference title. And then they went through another rough stretch. That's Mike Riley's years. So you can sort of see the pockmarkets of program history that he at least saw good things in and where he didn't. And it sort of lines up Solich, who was a Tom Osborne descendant, Osborne hired him, and Pelini, and then the guys that obviously he didn't think did it the right way, Callahan and Riley. So this institutional knowledge, I think, has probably driven Scott Frost in how he's worked in programs, Oregon, and then having his own at UCF, and how he'll set things up here. But it also drives the idea of, at Nebraska, this is what works. This is what works. This is the new stuff I'm bringing. And here's a whole lot of stuff that we're just throwing out, never to be spoken of again, sort of.
Parker, generally in terms of recruiting, Nebraska's got to go elsewhere, like Iowa, like Minnesota, like most of the Big Ten Western Division. I've seen some things, though, that Nebraska high school football is in good shape. It's going to be a good year that could help recruiting just inherently.
Yeah, they've got 3. So they've got 3 scholarship verbal commitments for 2019, all of them from the state of Nebraska. They were set, we talked about this when they got here, when Scott Frost and his staff got here in December. They had 2 months to put together an entire recruiting class. Basically, they were down to 6 verbal commits. They wound up with 24 players. But not only were they playing catch up in the 2018 class, but they did almost no work on 2019 in that period, just because they were, using every minute to work on 2018. So they're still catching up a little bit, I think, in that respect. But they really like the talent in state. They've got 3 from here. There's 2 more kids in Omaha that they have scholarship offers out to. They may not be the last in Nebraska. We'll see how it goes. But 5 already scholarship offers in state is a lot. And then if you just zoom out a little bit, There's a 4-star quarterback in Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is just across the Missouri River. And there's a lot of talent in Kansas City and St. Louis this year. And that's the sort of regional radius that, and Wichita, Kansas too. That's the regional radius that Nebraska feels like it should dominate. Now, it's easier said than done. Everyone recruits St. Louis, and a lot of people recruit Kansas City, but they want to be players for the best kids coming out of those areas. In 2019, there's a lot of talent there, so it'll be a great first test sort of on how they do in those areas.
All right, Parker Gabriel joining us from Husker Extra to break down Nebraska football. You can hear the knowledge, the insight, the information that he has, so check him out at Husker Extra. From me, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check me out on all the audio platforms as well for the complete conversations. If you love college football, I've got like 50 to 100 of Parker Gabriels coming on that do a great job in setting us up. And we need, Parker, like I told you the first time you came on, need Nebraska football coverage, because despite the record, whatever the record is, it's Nebraska football. And now with Scott Frost on the scene, obviously, people are taking notice. So we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me anytime.